At our engagement party, my mill gave a toast and said, "Some women trap men with rings. Let's hope that's not the case here." Laughter, applause, I clenched my jaw. My fiancé said, "She's just nervous." So I took the mic. And I read her old Facebook messages, every one where she called me trash, manipulative, and a temporary phase. The room fell silent. I set the mic down and walked out. We still got married, but she wasn't at the ceremony. I was standing in the middle of the room at our engagement party in Fort Collins, Colorado, holding a cheap flute of champagne that tasted like metal. Everyone had gathered around the little stage my fiancé's family set up in their backyard. String lights, mason jars, the whole Pinterest thing. His mom, Linda, insisted on giving a toast from the heart. I should have known that was a trap. She lifted her glass, smiled at me like I was a stain on her carpet, and said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Some women trap men with rings. Let's hope that's not the case here." People laughed. Real laughs. Light, casual, like she'd just said something quirky and adorable. I felt my jaw lock so hard it hurt. My fiancé, Mark, squeezed my waist and whispered, "She's just nervous. Don't make it a thing." Don't make it a thing. Even though she'd basically called me a gold-digging manipulator in front of 60 people. My blood was buzzing. Not boiling, buzzing. That sharp, vibrating anger that makes everything suddenly crystal clear. I looked around. Some people were whispering. A few looked at me with pity, and Linda. She smiled, satisfied, like she'd finally said what she'd always wanted to say. I walked toward the mic. Mark whispered my name like a warning, but I didn't stop. I grabbed the mic with both hands. My voice shook, but not from fear. From restraint. "I wasn't planning on saying anything tonight," I started, but since honesty is in the air, I reached into my purse, pulled out a stack of printed papers, her Facebook messages, the ones she thought she deleted before Mark could ever see them, except screenshots are forever. I read every single one out loud, the ones where she called me trash, where she said I was a manipulative little climber, where she wrote, "It's just a temporary phase. He'll marry someone real one day." No one laughed now. Someone dropped a fork. Someone else whispered, "Holy shit." Linda's face drained so fast I watched her turn gray. When I finished, I folded the papers neatly, set the mic down like it was hot glass, and walked straight out of the party. I didn't look at Mark. I didn't look at anyone. He caught up to me in the driveway, breathless, panicked. But by then the night had already cracked open, and everything between us felt different, shakier, thinner, like it could tear with one more pull. We still got married, but Linda wasn't at the ceremony. And the reason why, well, that didn't unfold the way anyone expected. I met Mark 3 years earlier at a bar in Old Town Fort Collins. Not the loud kind, more like dim lights, local beer, and mismatched chairs. I remember thinking he was too clean-cut for the place. He kept smoothing his shirt like he was trying to iron it with his hands. I teased him about it, he laughed, and somehow we ended up talking until the bartender flipped the stools. What hooked me was how easy he was. Not simple, just steady. He listened. He remembered things. He asked real questions. And he looked at me like I was someone worth paying attention to, which wasn't something I grew up feeling. My childhood was loud, unstable, and full of adults who didn't know how to treat each other. I left home at 19 and never really looked back. So when I met someone who actually seemed to come from a normal family, I thought I'd struck some kind of emotional gold. Except normal was the lie I told myself. I didn't meet Linda, his mom, until we'd been dating for almost 6 months. She lived just outside town in a 2-story house that felt like a museum of her own accomplishments. Photos of her in college, her marathon medals, her pottery, her framed Employee of the Month plaques. There was one tiny picture of Mark tucked behind a plant on the windowsill. I should have noticed that. She sized me up the second I walked in the door, not with words, with the way her eyes flicked to my shoes, my hair, my purse. The way she pressed her lips together like she was holding back a lemon, but she was polite, fake polite. Slow smiles, backhanded compliments, the kind of questions that sound warm but feel cold. "So, what exactly do you do? Is that your natural hair color? Did you grow up around here?" Oh. Every time we visited, it was some new little jab, microscopic, almost invisible until you added them up. Mark always brushed it off. "She's old-fashioned," he'd say. "She doesn't mean anything by it." But then the comments got louder, more pointed, less careful. When Mark wasn't in the room, she'd make jokes about how I probably couldn't cook. Or how some girls work fast when they see a man with a steady job. She'd laugh like we were bonding, like I was supposed to join in. Still, I tried. I wasn't trying to impress her, I just didn't want to start a war. I'd seen too many families implode from stupid things, and I didn't want that for us. But the real shift came when Mark and I moved in together. That's when she started calling, showing up unannounced, checking in, and then the messages, DMs sent late at night, comments on old photos she thought I wouldn't see, snide little digs phrased like concern. I told Mark. He told me I was reading too much into it, that she was just protective. But the night he proposed, that's when I learned the truth. The messages weren't just passive-aggressive, they were vicious. And what she told Mark before the proposal, that part didn't come out until much later. Way after the engagement party blow-up. Way after the wedding. And when I finally learned it, everything snapped into place in a way that made my stomach twist. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Things really started slipping about a year before the engagement party. It wasn't one big moment, it was 100 tiny ones piling up until they formed this heavy, constant pressure in my chest. At first, it was the way Linda acted every time Mark mentioned our future. If he said something like, "When we move," she'd smile a tight smile and say, "If you move." If he said, "We're thinking about getting a dog," she'd tilt her head and go, "That's ambitious." All these little comments meant to plant doubt, like she was trying to pull him back a few steps every time he tried to step forward. But things escalated when Mark got a promotion at his job in Loveland. A good promotion. One he'd been chasing for 2 years. I was so damn proud of him. We celebrated with takeout Thai and cheap champagne. Linda didn't congratulate him. She said, "I hope you didn't get distracted and make any choices you'll regret later." Right in front of me, like I wasn't sitting at the same table. That night in the car, I told Mark I didn't want to see her for a while. He sighed, rubbed his forehead, and said I was being dramatic. Dramatic. Over a woman who couldn't say one nice thing to me without dressing it up in poison. We fought hard. Not screaming, but the kind where you talk in low voices because you're afraid if you say things too loudly, you'll never be able to take them back. He kept saying, "She's just awkward. She doesn't know how to be emotional." But it wasn't awkwardness. It was cruelty wrapped in etiquette. Then came the holiday incident. We'd planned to spend Christmas with his family. I baked cookies, wrapped gifts, tried to be the bigger person. But when we walked into the house, Linda barely said hello. She looked behind us and said, "Oh, I thought you came alone." Mark froze, I froze. No one said anything. We stayed for dinner, but it was tense. Every word she said was some little jab. Some people rush things. Some people latch on. Some people don't understand real commitment. When we got back to our apartment, I told him I wouldn't put myself through that again. He got quiet. Really quiet. 2 days later, he told me his mom had been venting to him about how she thought I was using him to escape my background. I don't even know how she learned anything about my past, but somewhere along the way, she'd turned my rough childhood into ammunition. And then the messages started. The late-night Facebook messages that she thought I wouldn't dare show him, the ones where she called me trash, where she said I was clinging to Mark like a lifeline, where she told him, directly, in one long rant, that marrying me would ruin his trajectory. He didn't show me that one until much later. I didn't know then. All I knew was what she sent me. I told Mark I was done trying. He told me he needed me to meet her halfway. Halfway to what? Letting her spit in my face. Everything got worse once the engagement rumors started. The passive-aggressive comments became outright hostility. I could feel something brewing in her, a bitterness that didn't make sense yet, something deeper than disapproval. There was one interaction, about a month before he proposed, that I still think about. We were at her house for dinner. She watched me cut vegetables and said, in this weird low voice, "Women like you always show their true colors eventually." Women like me. I didn't know what she meant, not back then, but later. Oh, I learned exactly what she meant, and that knowledge changed everything. The first real crack, the one that didn't just hurt but changed the entire shape of things, happened 3 days after Mark proposed. We'd announced it on Instagram, nothing flashy. Just a picture of us at Horsetooth Reservoir, him holding my shaking hands, me ugly crying because I didn't see it coming. People congratulated us. Friends, coworkers, my cousin who barely remembers my birthday. It felt good. Like maybe all the crap with Linda was just background noise. Then Mark got weird. Not distant, exactly, just distracted. restless, checking his phone every few minutes, stepping out onto the balcony to talk, closing doors, lowering his voice, and every time I asked who it was, he'd say, "Just work stuff." Except Mark never hid work stuff. 2 nights into the weirdness, his phone lit up while he was in the shower. I wasn't checking it, I swear. It buzzed so loud the whole nightstand rattled. I glanced over. The screen showed the name, Linda, and beneath it, "We need to talk about what you told me. Call me now." My stomach dropped. What he told her? About what? A minute later, another text popped up. "If you go through with this, you're making a mistake you can't undo." Something cold slid down my spine. When Mark came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, hair dripping, I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just showed him the screen and said, "What's going on?" He froze, just froze. And then he said the sentence that cracked something deep inside me. "She found out something I told her during the proposal planning, and she's blowing it out of proportion." "What did you tell her?" I asked. He scrubbed a hand over his face and said, "I told her you were sensitive, that you take things personally, that your past makes you react strongly sometimes." He said it soft, carefully, but it still hit me like he'd slapped me. Sensitive. Takes things personally, reacts strongly. He'd handed her the exact tools she needed to paint me as unstable. I asked, "Why would you tell her anything about my past?" My voice cracked, but I didn't care. "I didn't mean it like that," he said. "I just wanted her to understand you better. But she doesn't want to understand me. She wants to break us." He didn't deny it, and that silence. That's when I knew she had gotten to him in ways I couldn't see. But that wasn't the real twist. The real twist came a few days later, when I went to his mom's house to pick up a box of Mark's old things. I wasn't planning on seeing her. I figured I'd grab the box, leave, and avoid any interaction. She was waiting for me in the kitchen. She didn't smile, didn't say hello. She just slid a folded piece of paper across the counter. "Since you're going to marry my son," she said, "you should know what he really thinks." My chest tightened. I unfolded the paper. It was a printed screenshot, a text conversation. Between Mark and her. My eyes burned as I read it. "Mark, she's good for me, Mom, even if she's a lot sometimes." "Linda, a lot, try unstable." "Mark, she's not unstable, she just has issues, childhood stuff, she clings." "Linda. And that doesn't worry you?" "Mark, of course it does, but she loves me." "Clings, has issues, worries me. A lot sometimes." The room tilted. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Linda leaned in close enough that I could smell her perfume, sharp, floral, suffocating. "I didn't even have to twist anything," she whispered. "He handed me everything himself." My legs went numb. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, barely able to breathe. "Because," she said, "I want you to understand one thing before you marry him, even he knows you're beneath him." That was the moment everything in me hardened. Not just anger, resolve, because suddenly it wasn't just her. It was him. He had given her the weapon. He had fed her the words she used to tear into me. And that was when the idea of revenge quietly, calmly, started forming. Not out of rage, out of clarity. I didn't tell Mark what his mother showed me. Not yet. I walked out of that house moving on autopilot, like my body was operating separately from my brain. I sat in my car for almost 15 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, feeling this strange mix of heartbreak, humiliation, and something sharper. Something that felt like a blade warming in my hand. I kept thinking about those messages. She clings. She has issues. Of course it worries me. He didn't defend me. Not really. Not in the way a partner should. He didn't shut it down. He didn't tell her she was out of line. He just explained me, like I was a problem she needed instructions for. On the drive home, the anger settled into something steadier. Not explosive, strategic. I realized something important. If I confronted Mark right then, he'd get defensive. He'd backtrack, apologize in circles, try to soothe me, then run right back to his mother the second I calmed down. No. If I was going to do this, I needed to be smarter than both of them. So I waited, watched, listened. Over the next few weeks, while we started planning the engagement party, I started planning something else. Something bigger, something that wasn't about yelling or fighting or tearing him down. I wanted truth, real truth, laid out so cleanly they couldn't spin it, bury it, or rewrite it later. Step 1, I gathered everything. Every message Linda sent me, every screenshot of her posts, every comment she left under photos, every passive-aggressive text she tried to pass off as concern. I printed them, organized them. Categorize them like evidence in a case file. Step 2. I started paying attention to the way Mark talked about his mom. He didn't know I had that screenshot yet, so I let him talk. And the more he talked, the clearer it became. Linda had been planting seeds for months. Quiet ones. About me, about my past. About the kind of wife he needed. He didn't realize she'd conditioned him. Maybe he didn't want to realize it. Step 3. I made peace with something heavy, something I never thought I'd feel toward him. I didn't trust him anymore. Not fully. I still loved him. God, I loved him deeply. But trust. That was fractured. And I knew if I tried to address everything privately, he'd smooth it over, convince me I was overreacting, then run to his mom to reassure her that I wasn't going anywhere. So I decided the only way to break the cycle was to expose it. Not to hurt him, but to show him, really show him, how twisted things had gotten. And that meant doing it publicly. In front of the people who kept pretending Linda was harmless, quirky, just a little much. So when the engagement party came closer, I stayed quiet. I let Linda think she was winning. I let Mark believe things were calming down. Meanwhile, I rehearsed what I'd say if I got the chance. I didn't plan on reading the Facebook messages. I didn't even know if I'd have the guts. But I knew I needed something that would force the truth into the open. Something undeniable. Funny thing is, I didn't even plan to take the mic. Not until her toast. Not until she smirked while implying I was trapping her son. That was when the plan wrote itself. Clean, simple, brutal honesty. But here's the thing. The engagement party was just the first act. Because after that night, after she turned gray and people fell silent and Mark followed me outside shaking, something else surfaced. A new piece of the story, a darker piece. Something Linda had kept hidden, something Mark didn't know either. And that secret, the second twist, was worse than all the messages combined. It changed everything about why she hated me. Everything. 2 days after the engagement party blow-up, the house felt quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like we were holding our breath. Mark barely slept. He kept pacing, running his hands through his hair, whispering, "I can't believe you did that." Then immediately backtracking with, "I mean, I get why, but God." He wasn't angry. He wasn't defending his mom either. He was shaken. Like the ground under his history had shifted and he didn't know where to stand anymore. I was exhausted. Mentally gutted. But calm. Strangely calm. Like the kind of calm you get after a storm rips your house open and you're just staring at the mess. On the third morning, Mark said he needed space and went to his sister's place in Windsor for the afternoon. Fine by me. I needed space too, to think about whether I even wanted to stay in this mess. While he was gone, I got a message on Facebook. From someone named Evelyn Carter. At first I thought it was spam. A random profile picture of a middle-aged woman in sunglasses, the kind of account that usually sells diet pills or MLM candles. But the first line of her message made my stomach clench. "We need to talk about Linda. You don't know everything." Before I could respond, she sent another message. "I'm her older sister." Older sister. Linda had never mentioned a sister. Ever, she always talked about herself like she was an only child carrying the weight of her entire family. My pulse sped up. I typed, "What is this about?" Evelyn replied almost instantly. "She's been lying to Mark for years. And she's doing to you what she did to someone else a long time ago." A chill crept up my spine. She asked if she could call me. I hesitated, but something in my gut, the same gut Linda always said made me dramatic, told me to listen. I gave her my number. The call came through immediately. Her voice was steady, older, tired, like someone who'd spent decades carrying heavy truths alone. "First," she said, "I'm sorry for what my sister has done to you. You didn't deserve any of it." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just pressed the phone harder to my ear. Then she said the words that took everything I thought I understood and flipped it inside out. "Linda had another son." My breath stopped. "What?" "A long time ago," she continued. "Before she married Mark's father, she was in love with a man our parents hated, got pregnant at 20. They forced her to give the baby up for adoption. She never recovered from it. She blamed everyone, our parents, the father, herself. But most of all, she blamed the girl he ended up marrying later. The girl she thought stole the life she could have had." I swallowed. Hard. "What does that have to do with me?" I whispered. Evelyn exhaled like she hated saying it. "Because you remind her of that girl." I felt something cold and sick settle in my chest. She's been projecting all that old resentment onto you, Evelyn said. She's convinced herself that women like you take things she thinks she deserves. She did the same thing to Mark's last girlfriend, it's why that girl left. But with you, she paused. With you, it's worse. Because Mark loves you more deeply than she's ever seen him love anyone. The room felt like it tilted sideways. And there's something else, Evelyn added. Something she told me once years ago when she'd been drinking. My grip tightened on the phone. She said if she couldn't control her son's life, she'd rather burn every part of it down than watch someone she hated benefit from it. A shiver ran through me. This wasn't disapproval. This wasn't protectiveness. This wasn't a mother being difficult. This was obsession, long-held resentment, misplaced hatred so old it hardened into something dangerous. Evelyn said she'd been watching everything unfold online, the engagement post, the fallout, the whispers in town. She said she felt guilty for not warning me sooner, but Linda always threatened to cut her off if she ever told Mark the truth about the adoption. She doesn't want him to know she lost a child, Evelyn said. She doesn't want him to know she failed. And she definitely doesn't want him to know she's been channeling 30 years of bitterness into how she treats the women he loves. Then she said something that stuck with me. You're not the first person she's tried to destroy, but you might be the first person strong enough to stop her. When the call ended, I just sat there on the couch, stunned, numb, shaking. Everything made sense now. Every comment, every dig. Every attempt to wedge herself between us. It wasn't just about me. It was about the ghost of another woman, another life, another son. And if Mark didn't know this, if he had no idea, then the real danger was that he'd been manipulated by a story half told and half invented. Because the person he thought his mother was, that wasn't her at all. But the truth Evelyn gave me wasn't something I could just sit on. It was something that needed to be exposed. Carefully, completely, and in a way that Linda couldn't escape from. When Mark got home that night, I didn't tell him about Evelyn's call. Not yet. I needed to sit with it first, really sit with the weight of it, because the truth wasn't just painful. It was chilling. It reframed every second I'd spent around his mother. Every look she gave me, every jab, every concern, every twisted little smile. Because now I understood something I hadn't been able to see before. Linda didn't hate me for who I was. She hated me for who she believed I replaced. And the colder truth, the one Evelyn didn't sugarcoat, was this. Linda had spent 3 decades rewriting the story of her life, and in her version, she wasn't a victim of circumstance. She was robbed, cheated, wronged. All by women she decided were beneath her, but somehow still got what she believed should have been hers. Her lost child, her lost relationship, her lost future. But here's the part that twisted my stomach the most. The part Evelyn said slowly, like she wanted to soften the blow but couldn't. Linda thinks the world owes her a life she didn't get. And she believes other women owe her too. Other women. Women like me. Women who didn't grow up privileged. Women who didn't have support. Women who had to build a life from scraps and still managed to land on their feet. To her, we were thieves, living stolen lives, breathing stolen air. According to Evelyn, the obsession started when Mark was born. She poured everything into him, every dream she lost, every regret she swallowed. He wasn't her son, he was her replacement life. And when he grew up and started dating, when he showed signs of becoming his own person, she panicked. Clutched tighter, interfered more, twisted every relationship into something toxic until the girl ran. She's terrified of losing him, Evelyn said, not because she loves him unconditionally, but because she sees him as proof she didn't fail. If he chooses someone she considers beneath her, it confirms every fear she's had about herself. It hit me like a punch. Linda wasn't trying to protect Mark. She was trying to protect the delusion she'd built around her identity. And women like me, women who didn't grow up polished or perfect, were a threat to that delusion. But that wasn't the darkest part. Evelyn hesitated before telling me the last piece. I could hear it in her silence, like she was weighing whether I could handle it. And then she said, when she found out Mark was proposing, she said she'd rather lose him completely than have him marry someone she sees as a reminder of the life she was supposed to have. She meant it. She wasn't being dramatic. I felt my blood turn cold. Linda didn't just want to sabotage the relationship. She wanted to destroy it even if it destroyed her son in the process. That was her reason, not jealousy, not concern, not protectiveness. Resentment so deep it hollowed her out. Bitterness so old it fossilized. A hatred that wasn't personal, but still aimed straight at me. She didn't want Mark to love me. Because it proved she lost something she could never get back. She didn't want him to build a life with me, because she never got to build hers. She didn't want me near him. Because in her mind, I was living the life of the woman she'd never forgiven. Once I understood that, really understood it, everything inside me shifted. This wasn't a feud. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't family drama. This was a woman willing to burn her own son's happiness to protect a fantasy. And if I didn't confront it, not gently, not quietly, but openly, she'd keep poisoning him forever. She'd twist every milestone, every decision, every moment for the rest of our lives. No more whispers, no more half-truths, no more polite tolerance. The truth needed to come out, all of it, not just for me, for him, for us. And when it did, when everything finally came to the surface, that was when the real revenge became possible. Cold, clear, controlled, exactly the way she'd never see coming. I waited until things cooled just enough for Mark to come home without flinching. He looked tired, like the past week had aged him. When he sat down across from me at our tiny kitchen table, he said, "I want to fix this, but I don't know how." For the first time since the engagement party, I felt steady. Not angry, not hysterical, just done with the shadows and half-truths. So I told him everything. I told him about Evelyn's messages, about the phone call, about the adoption he never knew existed, about how his mother had been projecting 30 years of resentment onto every woman he tried to love. And finally, about the screenshot she'd shown me, the one he never knew I saw. He didn't react at first. He didn't yell or argue. He just sat there, staring at the table, his hands trembling. When he finally looked up at me, his face was pale. "She lied to me," he whispered. "My whole life." He asked to see the messages, the screenshots, all of it. I handed him the folder I had been building for months without even knowing why. He read every page. Slowly, completely. At one point, he put his head in his hands and said, "She treated you the same way my dad treated her, and she still became him." After a long silence, he said something that surprised me. "Will you come with me to talk to her? I need to hear her say it." I didn't hesitate. "Yeah, I will." We drove to her house the next morning. She opened the door with her usual tight-lipped expression, half judgment, half resentment. But when she saw the stack of papers in Mark's hand, something flickered in her eyes. Fear. He didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't give her the chance to manipulate the tone. He simply said, "Why did you lie to me for 30 years? Her mouth opened. Closed, opened again. She reached for some rehearsed excuse, some polished justification, but he didn't let her speak. He laid the papers on her dining table. Every message, every insult, every secret, every twisted, obsessive little piece. And then he told her about Evelyn, about the adoption, about everything she'd kept from him. Linda's face changed in a way I've never seen on a person. Not guilt, not shame, not even anger. Just pure exposure. A cornered animal realizing the room is too bright to hide in. She tried to deny it at first. Then she tried to twist it. Then she said I'd manipulated Evelyn into contacting me, until Mark said, "Stop. I don't believe you anymore." Those words hit her hard, harder than anything I could have said. When she realized he wasn't bending, she shifted tactics, tears, shaking voice. "I did it because I love you." But he wasn't buying it. "No," he said. "You did it because you wanted to control me, and because you hate her more than you love me." I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. He told her we were getting married, and that she wasn't invited, not to the ceremony, not to the reception, not to anything. The silence after that was heavy, ugly, final. As we walked out of her house, she said one last thing, sharp and cold. "You'll regret choosing her." Mark didn't even turn around. "I already regret choosing you," he said, and we left. On our wedding day at a small venue outside Estes Park, there was no trace of Linda, no looming presence, no tension humming under the surface. Mark looked lighter, freer. Like a weight he didn't realize he was carrying had finally fallen off. During the reception, he pulled me aside. He said, "You saved us. I didn't see it, but you saved us." And for the first time, I believed it, because revenge wasn't humiliating her at the engagement party. It wasn't exposing her messages. It wasn't even cutting her out of our wedding. The real revenge was this. We built a life she couldn't control, a happiness she couldn't rewrite, a future she could never poison again. And that was the closure I needed. When we left the venue that night and crossed the parking lot hand in hand, I said one last thing, mostly to myself, but loud enough for the sky to hear. Some women trap men with rings, huh? Funny. I guess I trapped him with the truth. And for once, the air felt clean.